Bilingual language use. As we said, translanguaging is based on bilingual language use, bilingual language contact, and it happens through language borrowing. Now let's look at bilingual language use. We said this before, that more often than not, bilinguals have differential competence in the languages that they know, and also the differential skills within those languages and differential competence in the use of those languages within specific domains. So, we also discussed that languages, when they are used together or simultaneously, bilinguals are not just drawing upon linguistic empty codes, rather they are bringing in that cultural meaning attached to that kind of code. And when they are using it in a different context, they are bringing a different type of reality to it, which they are constructing with the person they are talking to. Now, it is argued by Fishman that if we want to understand how bilinguals use language, a domain analysis might help. So what is a domain? A domain is an abstract construct related to different types of situations that bilinguals come across. For instance, you might have this domain of education, a domain of work, domain of family, domain of peer relationships, friendships, and similarly domain of politics, etc. So this will allow us to compare the use of language by bilinguals and see how these patterns arise in one context and how are they different or similar when the same bilinguals might interact with each other in other domains. However, it might be a little complex, as we can see. So, for instance, let's take an example of a bilingual in Africa, because in Africa, the linguistic situation is much more complex because there are multiple languages being used by the same person, and it's not restricted to knowing just one or two languages, which might be the case in other contexts. So this is a bilingual in Africa, and he speaks to his parents in Tashwinda, goes out to work and talks to his workmates in isiZulu, and then he faces his supervisor, who always gives him instructions in Afrikaans. Then he goes to this bank and he uses English to interact with people. And if he comes across some educated strangers, that person will use English. And when he goes out to the pub in the evening, he'll be using Fanagalo. So what actually is happening is not multiple use of languages, just randomly spread across different domains. Rather, this is actually an execution of different social roles. So that person is actually expressing in the language use or through language use the changing social roles in different situations. Having said that, this concept of stable domains has been challenged. This concept of bilingual language use on the basis of some stable attitudes or stable values has again been challenged. And the reason behind is that researchers have drawn attention of how bilinguals might translanguage within a specific domain. So when you go to work, yes, you might use, for instance, in the case of Pakistan, English language or the standard Urdu, but you might still use regional language also within this domain of work. Similarly, if languages are about social roles, positioning of the self in relation to the other person you are talking to within a given context to construct a specific type of meaning, then they are also shifting and never stable. And if you are talking about values and attitudes, they also have a shifting nature depending on the context that this bilingual is surrounded by. Attention has also been drawn that translanguaging might be the result of a personal preference. And this principle is called the principle of complementarity. So how would you like somehow to put across your meaning and complement it with another language might not just have to do with your attitude or your value, but simply think of how you might prefer to do it. Having said that, it is difficult to come up with a main principle or the main principle to explain how and why translanguaging happens or the way it happens, because each bilingual might use the same language in different way, and in the same way that you may play a tune, but this tune might be played differently and significantly distinct from how other people might play the same tune in music. So, although some general principles might be delineated and they are important to be done so for theoretical reasons, yet we have to acknowledge that this is a dynamic phenomenon.